Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the CONVO Couch. I am Fiorella Isabel. And yesterday I was at an election sort of party for Lorraine Lindquist. I'm not really sure what the results are, but she's a progressive scientist running for city council. So let's hope she did pretty well. I wanted to talk literally just specifically about what the mainstream media has been doing to Bernie Sanders yet again. Now, we've seen the mainstream media be more attacking towards Tulsi Gabbard. We haven't really seen them attack Bernie like they did in 2016, but it seems like they're very desperate right now. So if you guys didn't notice, in another act of smearing Bernie, CNN anchors equated Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump for calling out the bias in the Washington Post with the owner, Jeff Bezos, and saying that they don't treat Bernie really well, which is entirely true. So I wanted to literally go over that because what we're seeing here is that the Democratic Party wants nothing to do with Bernie. And no matter how we think that we've moved them forward, they would seemingly rather lose to Donald Trump than win with a Bernie Sanders. So Johnny, let's go ahead and take a look at what these CNN anchors did. And here's a picture, by the way. It says Bernie Sanders makes Trump like attack on the Washington Post. This is a very dangerous road we're going in. Yes.
The Washington Post is pushing back at criticism from Senator Bernie Sanders. The 2020 Democratic hopeful blasted the Post coverage of his campaign, and he argues that it is biased because it is owned by Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. Listen to Sanders in New Hampshire yesterday.
Anybody here know how much Amazon paid in taxes last year? Yeah. See, and I talk about that all of the time, and then I wonder why the Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, doesn't write particularly good articles about me. I don't know why.
He failed to provide any evidence of that. Those past comments along those lines were echoed by his campaign and prompted this reply by Marty Barron, the executive editor for the Washington Post. Quote, Senator Sanders is a member of a large club of politicians of every ideology who complain about their coverage. Contrary to the conspiracy theory that the senator seems to favor, Jeff Bezos allows our newsroom to operate with full independence, as our reporters and editors can attest. Kirsten Powers is here, columnist for USA Today, and Brittany Shepard, national politics reporter.
Okay. So before I let the rest of the video play, I want to say this. Conspiracy theory. They are already using the word conspiracy theory to equate any sort of criticism of the mainstream media as something that is so unbelievable that it's entirely false. So now anytime someone rightfully criticizes a bias in the mainstream media, now it's going to be seen as conspiracy theory. So let's play the rest of the video.
For Yahoo News. Good morning, guys. I was a little surprised, Kirsten, to hear Sanders say it himself, but it's not new to see his campaign really taking on the media without providing any evidence of bias. Just listen to his campaign manager, Faz Shakir. He was on Reliable Sources with Brian Stelter just a few weeks ago.
In about, a minute or so or 2 minutes or so, you're going to cut to commercial breaks and you're going to see some pharmaceutical ads. You're going to see a lot of ads that are basically paying your bills and the bills of this the entire media enterprise. And what that ends up doing is incentivizing you and others to make sure that you're asking the questions and driving the conversations in certain areas and not in certain areas.
So Kirsten, Brian followed up, asked for evidence. He didn't provide any. But this seems like a really dangerous line. Continued accusations against the media with no basis in fact or evidence provided.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly in bounds to complain about your coverage, right? If you think, and this is what every single campaign does. I mean, even Barack Obama's campaign complained about their coverage, right?
Sure.
So it's not people often think when they're running for president that they are the only person who doesn't like their coverage, and that's just not true. This moving into these kind of conspiracy theories about why is what's different. And I think in the climate that we're in right now with the President of the United States, who has really gone after all media that hasn't fallen completely in line with him.
Okay, stop it for 1 second.
And really.
Okay, So not only are they saying it's a conspiracy theory, now they're making the twist and they're gaslighting. They're gaslighting because now they're saying he's not providing any proof. And we're going to talk about all the proof that there's been, because there's plenty of proof. And they're talking about how nobody else is complaining about their media coverage, or how everybody else complains, actually. But we're not really seeing other people complain. We're not seeing Kamala Harris complain, because when we see what the media says about Kamala Harris after Tulsi literally smacked her down, they turned around and turned it around on Tulsi Gabbard, calling her an Assad apologist, asking her about Assad, and asking her all these gotcha questions that they didn't ask other candidates. So obviously, they're being disingenuous. And now they started making the turn to comparing him to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump called CNN fake news. So that must mean that he and Bernie are basically the same, right? Let's go.
Is offering full-throated support. Pretty much everybody else has been attacked, as fake news and not trustworthy. And so I think what the Sanders campaign is doing is falling into, it's using that same playbook, frankly. Yeah. And it would be problematic even without Donald Trump, but considering the culture that we're in, where the media is under such constant attack, I think that you should be very careful about the accusations you make, and you better be able to back them up.
You know, Brittany, it's important to note the Washington Post has done really critical reporting about Amazon, too.
Absolutely. And, I really want to underscore something that Kirsten said, something that you said too, Poppy, is that Bernie Sanders and his campaign have not really put forth any facts or evidence when they're pressed about what the Washington Post is doing. And I do think that there's a concern, and especially a concern as we're gearing up in this primary, that Bernie Sanders is going to be compared to Donald Trump again. That's not a comparison he wants. He wants to hear Elizabeth Warren's name. He wants to hear more progressive parts of his party, like AOC. And when you're going against such a standard like the Washington Post, which has come out and said from Marty Barron himself that you are perpetuating a conspiracy that sounds just like the President of the United States, calling the Washington Post Amazon's Washington Post, you get into very sticky campaign territory.
Okay, so I just wonder.
Let's stop it right there. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop this several times before we actually get through it. Why the hell would he want to be compared to Elizabeth Warren when his ideas are the ones she adopted? His ideas in 2016 are the ones he adopted. It's great. Actually, she's the one that people are comparing to Bernie. The problem with this statement is that I'm seeing that, of course, they're highlighting in a positive manner Elizabeth Warren. Why do you think they don't have a problem with Elizabeth Warren, but yet they have a problem with Bernie Sanders? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wouldn't even be in Congress if she wasn't inspired to run because of Bernie Sanders' campaign. So again, we're seeing that they take everything that he has done positively, that he is talking about the bias in the media, which is extremely clear. Everybody knows that there's huge bias in the media. And just because Donald Trump weaponizes it and uses it for his base does not mean that it's not true. So let's watch.
Kirsten, if you think that this is going to be picked up by other Democratic 2020 contenders, the Biden camp is not happy with, the media covering the multiple gaffes and misstatements that he's made over the past few weeks. Listen to Tim Ryan, Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan, also presidential candidate, and his read. Let me tell you what he said. He said, "This is such an important election. We've got to all be our best. We can't make mistakes because the right-wing noise machine, they take something like that, they put up a false equivalency, make him and Trump sound like they're the same." Simone Sanders, who is a senior strategist for Biden, said on this network yesterday, this is a press narrative, not a voter narrative, saying basically the media focuses on this, the voters don't care. What's your read?
I mean, that's a fine thing to say if that's what the Biden campaign believes. And like I said, I don't think that's out of bounds. I don't think it's out of bounds to say that you don't think you're getting fair coverage and to detail why you think you aren't getting fair coverage. I don't agree with what Simone said. I think that the fact that you have a president that's the age of Joe Biden, who seems to be mixing things up and not getting things right, it does raise a question of, is this guy going to be ready to go up against Trump? That's a fair thing. I don't expect the campaign to agree with me on that. And so it's fine for them to push back. I think what's problematic is these accusations that have no basis in fact, like the idea that somehow people at CNN are asking questions or behaving in a certain way because of the ads that are playing while they're on air, which, as we all know, we don't know what ads are coming on when we're on air. So you need to be able to if you're going to make that accusation, you better be able to offer some proof. Otherwise, you are acting just like Donald Trump. I'm sorry.
But hasn't it been beneficial to Donald Trump in some groups, Brittany? Meaning, is there a political price to pay among voters if the Sanders camp keeps making unsubstantiated allegations like this?
Absolutely nice, especially with young voters and swing voters. And I want to touch a little bit on what Joe Biden's camp is saying, because I think it's similar to what we're seeing with Bernie Sanders, is that sure that there's a media narrative and a voter narrative. I think that's valid. But the voter narrative is definitely not solidified. And even though in the polling we're seeing that Bernie Sanders is among the top 3 or top 4, Joe Biden is usually the front runner in all national polls, they have a duty to their base to get not only solidify the support they have, but to get new voters. So young voters are about to make up 10% of the electorate in 2020, and young voters are across the board not necessarily gunning for any of the top contenders. So Bernie Sanders, if he wants to risk losing those young people, he should really be aware of what he's saying in regards to fake news media coverage.
Okay. Well, first of all, Bernie Sanders isn't at risk at losing young people. That is the majority of his supporters, by the way. So that doesn't even make any sense. So they keep talking about Bernie not having any sort of proof that this is happening, even though we've all seen it, right? What Faiz said is true. They play ads that are according to the narrative that the media is spinning. These people are getting paid millions of dollars to tell a slanted narrative. We know this. We've known this for a while now. But where is the proof? Okay, where is the proof? Okay, let's start with what happened. After CNN did this whole thing, that same day, we see NPR with Fox News with the same kind of titles. Sanders blasts Bezos on Washington Post over bias and echo of Trump. Sounding like Trump goes after Amazon and Washington Post. Political, Sanders walks into suggestion Bezos meddled in Washington Post. CNN again. And then The Hill, Washington Post editor calls Sanders' claim about campaign coverage, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, every other mainstream media article within that set amount of time, literally echoing the same sort of message. And you have to wonder, do all these people just magically think the same? Or is it that they are all following the mainstream media narrative where their bosses are telling them, hey, you can't say this or you're fired, which we've seen a lot of these people who worked on MSNBC left and went to other places like RT, for instance, right? Now, additionally, in addition to that, in addition to all the mainstream media that we've seen and all of the attacks on Bernie, what's wrong with this assessment that Bernie is actually acting like Trump? In what world is truly a democratic socialist whose message is about love and unity and bringing people together to be equated with Donald Trump at his core, whose message is about more division, more fear, telling, Americans that the problems are stemming from other people coming into the country? Maybe the one thing that Donald Trump ever got right is that there is fake news. And that's probably why he won the election. If you guys remember in 2016, CNN, MSNBC, all these people gave Trump unlimited amounts of coverage that they did not give Bernie Sanders. And then they turn around and complain about Donald Trump winning the election. They gave him free coverage. Any press, whether bad or good, is press. Any kind of attention, whether bad or good, is attention. They incentivize his base. So basically, the truth is we need to be independent thinkers. Just because Donald Trump says something doesn't mean it's not true. Donald Trump may get a lot of things wrong, but the one thing he got right was saying that CNN is fake news. They are fake news. If you don't believe me, Like, I will show you how fake they are. And I think at this point, we should all be aware at just exactly how fake they are. They're biased. And the problem is that Donald Trump starts with a truth, like many in the Republican Party that start things with truth, like Alex Jones, and then he devolves into a lie. But we have to be able to differentiate between what's truth and what isn't truth based on our independent thinking. We can't just say, oh, everything Trump says is wrong. And so now anybody that says anything remotely close to Donald Trump is now a liar. And so Bernie Sanders is exactly like Trump. The one thing that Bernie Sanders got that is similar to Trump as well is the fact that he's an actual outsider, anti-establishment politician. Trump ran as that, but we know that's not really what he's done policy-wise. So we need to stop this idea that what these people are saying is a conspiracy theory, because again, that's a very dangerous road to go on. What Bernie Sanders does is he focuses on the money. Follow the money. And that's something I've learned from Bernie Sanders and politicians who call out money in politics. Bezos owns the Washington Post. And the Washington Post, Johnny, ran 16 negative attacks on Bernie Sanders in 2016. And this is from fair.org. And we see that here. Literally, that you're going to tell me that they did that for Hillary Clinton? Are you kidding me? They were praising her. Simultaneously, at the same time they were running all of these stories, they were praising Hillary Clinton. And picking up where they left off in 2019, they ran 4 negative stories in 2 days. And it's continued since then. I mean, this is from a while ago. This is from the beginning. But this is what they do. So Bernie Sanders isn't an idiot, and neither is his campaign. They are very aware of what the Washington Post does. In fact, David Serrata constantly calls them out on Twitter. And it's one of these things where you would have to be denying reality to completely ignore that there is this bias. So CNN and MSNBC anchors constantly talk about Bernie's age, his race, and how he makes their skin crawl. In addition to what we're talking about, the bias in Bezos. And Bezos doesn't like Bernie. I mean, Bernie stood up to him and demanded that his workers get $15 minimum wage. I've talked to Amazon workers who have benefited from this and who went from earning $11, $12 an hour to now making $15 an hour. And so this isn't something that is made up. Bernie Sanders is obviously going to be hated by those people, those corporate elites that he is attacking. And sometimes the media has put out very anti-Semitic tropes like Political did in this recent article that we saw, where even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called it out. And they talked about Bernie Sanders having 3 homes and a net worth approaching at least $2 million, and talking about how his book gave him money and how he's a socialist. And then the worst thing they did is they put out Bernie next to 2 houses on his shoulder, which is entirely anti-Semitic. But of course, the Democratic Party only likes to call something anti-Semitic when Ilhan Omar, a Muslim Somali woman, is calling them out on it. But when it's against Bernie Sanders, a progressive independent from Vermont, they don't care. So that's another form of hypocrisy that we're going to call out right now, because I just can't. Johnny, do you have anything to say so far?
I just want to do some shout outs.
Yeah,
to
let's
everybody.
do some shout outs.
I see Michael Cruz on the line.
So again, they want to pretend that there's no bias, and you guys all very well know that there's bias, and we've seen it now be reminiscent with Tulsi Gabbard is their latest politician that they're trying to smear. Bezos stands to lose so much money because of the taxes Bernie is going to impose on him, and because he's going to continue to watch him and how he treats his workers if he becomes president. Let's talk about who owns CNN. CNN is owned by AT&T Warner Media. MSNBC is owned by NBC Universal, who's owned by Comcast. These people all stand to lose their pro-military and neoliberal narrative agenda for a more free, independent, free of money coverage if Bernie Sanders becomes president. So of course they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that the public viewpoint is framed in a very negative way. Unfortunately, the majority of people outside of that are older tend to watch mainstream media. And it's only been until recent, the advent of YouTube and the advent of independent media, that we've seen people start looking at other avenues. And even CNN now, though, they have their own YouTube and they have their own shows that they're putting out there to kind of drive off the independent media competition, which is unfair. And we've seen YouTube demonetize independent media. We've ourselves been victim of that when you talk about things that are a little bit out, like Epstein, or things that are controversial that they don't want you to talk about.
Or Seth Rich.
Yeah, they'll literally take us down. But let's talk about what the media says. The media said that Elizabeth Warren was the winner, right, of Iowa, that she had the largest crowds. But people there were telling me that some of the people in line that were counted for her were actually going to a Slipknot concert, and they were in line for that. And also from the campaign and other reports of people actually there, they concluded that Bernie Sanders had the largest attendance. And if we look at this picture, it's pretty clear that Bernie had, that's thousands and thousands of people. I don't think I've ever seen that many people there. But I want to quickly show a video because Bernie himself kind of is fed up with the way the media is treating him, and rightfully so. I mean, this has been happening for years, especially more so when he ran in 2016. But he basically calls out a reporter who's pretty much trying the same old tricks. If we can play it.
Your polling numbers here in Iowa have gone down a little bit.
No, you're looking at one poll which the media seems to like to talk about. Actually, if you look at the reports of polling since the last debate, guess which candidate has gone up the most? Thank you very much.
Where are the glasses with the dank sign, Johnny? That's Bernie right there. Yeah, I mean, let me just kind of touch on the polling, because a lot of people panic when they see Bernie Sanders polling below Biden or Warren or even Harris. So it's just ridiculous. I think I've seen one poll with that. But we can't pay attention to the polls. We should only pay attention to them as far as qualifying for people like Tulsi or Marianne or whoever you're supporting. But as far as actually the credibility of these polls, you have to look at the basic statistics of it, look at the sample size, look at who, like the age group, if it's a representative sample. I mean, these are basic things, but most people don't look at that. And so when you see a poll that says Joe Biden is 31% and Bernie Sanders is at 15%, people are like, well, he might not have a shot. I guess I'll just have to. No, that's what they want you to do. But the polls in 2016 obviously were entirely wrong. They completely led to the idea that anybody could beat Trump, that Hillary would beat Trump, and this is where we are today. So I want to quickly talk about the media, how they spin everything to make Bernie look like this radical person that doesn't have a shot, that can't relate. His ideas don't relate to the majority of Americans, when that's actually the exact opposite. We've seen, and since I looked at it last, it was 8.3 million, but it's probably a lot more now. On 8.5 now. Okay.
Hello, Bernie.
So Bernie went on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan
pleasure to meet you.
Nice
is,
to meet you.
you know, he is I would say he's an independent thinker. I would say that he's had very alt-right people on this show. As a person in media, that's what you're supposed to do. I think we've gotten so used to the idea of living in an echo chamber, of living either on the left or on the right, that we've forgotten how media is actually supposed to function. And when it functions the way it's supposed to function, we're all like uncomfortable with it. A lot of us are. But really, what Joe Rogan does is a breath of fresh air, because he's not even like a super trained media person. He's just like a guy asking a lot of questions, because he's not really politically he's not a political junkie, but he asks questions like a human being. And what happened in that interview, to me, was the best decision Bernie Sanders could have made, because it opened him and his ideas up to a wide audience of people that had previously wrote him off as radical because of the mainstream media coverage, that had previously thought that he was this communist, like Fox News says, or this unelectable old man like CNN likes to point out. So let's look at why maybe the mainstream media might be scared shitless. So we have a few of these comments.
Out.
Yeah, Johnny, go ahead.
Yeah, these are the comments from Joe Rogan's YouTube from the video. Let's see. Eric says, this made me want to vote for him. I come from a conservative family. Mission accomplished. Riley says, I just rethought my entire political view. Bernie really for the people. Nano says, damn, man, I really never got to hear what he was trying to say. He was a lot of fucking good points. This is insane. I'm reading some of the replies to this interview, many of them saying basically he's not as far left or as crazy as I thought. He's been saying the same shit for decades. He's simply been a victim of political propaganda. He's the most pragmatic and rational candidate I've heard since Perot, who was marginalized too. Hashtag Sanders 2020. I've changed my mind on this man. Really great interview. And like when you took a screenshot of these, you know, these were all recent comments, right? This says 14 minutes ago, an hour ago.
Yeah, these were all recent. I mean, there's so many. There's so many.
And then, yeah, we just have a bunch more to read through, but yeah.
And then, let's see. Let's read blah, blah, blah. Okay, let me see if I can find one. My Super Mario 34. I consider myself the exact opposite of a socialist, but Bernie is onto something, taxing Wall Street's 0.5% for every trade. It would create a more stable stock market as well as creating more revenue for the country. Plus, we already bailed them out. So, and then Michael said, where is this guy on the national media always portrayed as an old nut job who is out of touch? Got me thinking. Jack, definitely not a Bernie guy or even a Democrat, but this is a good interview. He's way more logical than the media makes him out to be. Jimbo, I've always wrote Bernie off and thought his ideas were ridiculous and that he was too far left. But after listening to this, he makes great points and gave actual solutions to problems that many politicians dance around.
That's right.
Schmidt, I have never been a Bernie supporter until today. Wow. Jay Anaya, well, after this video, I think I'm a Bernie supporter. Yosef, I wasn't a big Bernie fan until this. Joe, you need to do this stuff more often. Him having a real chance to speak changed my mind from the sound bites you hear on the news. Hero Vincent, I just signed up to volunteer. Anthony, thank you for getting him on. Completely changed my perspective on Bernie. Psychotics, gained a lot of respect for him. Guess it helps that you don't have biased media outlets cherry picking every word. A good guy. Tanisha, what an eye-opening interview and very well done. This is how long-form interviews should be done. I didn't know much about Bernie previous to listening to this episode, but I'm very impressed with him and his ideas. He knows we need immediate solutions and has ideas and is open to the ideas of others. And most importantly, is more than willing to work with anyone who wants to get things done. Jason, I was on the fence on which Dem I was voting for until I watched this video. Decision made. Mick, he just makes sense to me, more so than any other candidate. Ane, it's like he's a real human using his brain, not a puppet controlled by money. Yeah. And Hoffenman's Cup. Bernie himself, mental health should be part of healthcare. Finally, I might be able to get help. Made me realize how now radical Sanders is. Brandon Avila. So, I mean, there's so many good comments that we could have gone through, but the message is the same, right? Oh, I didn't know until this point that Bernie isn't this radical socialist that I thought, oh, wow, like the media, this is a completely different guy to what the media is painting him as. Oh, like, holy crap, like I actually like his ideas, because without the media being there to literally kind of subliminally like mind control you into thinking that this guy and his ideas are so far to the left that they're unattainable, like, you like him. And just even if you don't know who he is, even if you don't know anything about him except that he's a socialist, but you just hear him talking about these ideas without a label, without just literally explaining to you why these issues are, like, these solutions are important to the issues that we're facing, instead of let's regain the soul of our country, which is completely vague and doesn't really offer a solution, then you actually can hear what he has to say. The problem is the mainstream media that has control and is completely tied in to the political world through lobbyists, through PAC money, doesn't let us achieve that. It doesn't let these ideas get through in a free form. And that is why independent media is so important, and why what Joe Rogan is doing and the platform he has is so vital to this election. And to be honest, when Bernie went on there, a lot of people were saying, well, he shouldn't go on there. He's the gateway to the alt-right, blah, 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 blah. And Oh yeah, in the Sanders camp, in the progressive camp, and of course, the neoliberal establishment. How dare he do that? And Elizabeth Warren. Well, I'm not going on Fox News because I won't. How do you expect to win an election if you're not going to talk to half the country? What is wrong with you? Like, they obviously don't care to win, because if you're going to ignore half the population just because they voted for someone for whatever reason, I mean, look. Bernie Sanders has said it many times, and he's been criticized for it. Not every single person that voted for Donald Trump is a racist. And that is entirely true, and I agree with him on that.